This is episode 14 with Tim Poulton.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 14, and today I'm speaking to Tim Poulton. Tim is an online entrepreneur, project manager, video guy, and a fellow South African. Now, after leaving their comfortable jobs in London, Tim and his wife moved to the countryside and soon found themselves in a little bit of debt. Needing to change their situation, they started up an online business and have since turned things around for themselves. And in this episode, you're going to learn how to use your skills to get a job when you aren't qualified. Is entrepreneurship a natural born talent or can it be developed? Should you start an online business, plus Tim's tips for getting started, how to leverage your discontentment at your day job to grow your passion project, and how to live without limits regarding your time, money, and goals. All the links and resources we mentioned are at the show notes at briantier.com/014, and I hope you enjoy this one. So without further ado, let's go hang out with Tim. Welcome back, everyone, and I'm very excited to be speaking to a fellow South African guest today, and his name is Tim Poulton. Tim, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Hey, Brian, good to be here, man. Thanks.
So, Tim, I wonder if you could just set the scene for us and tell the guests, who is Tim Poulton and what did your quarter life look like?
Yeah, so my quarter life comeback is quite an interesting question, really. I guess I'll start when I got married, right? So that was 2006. We were still in SA and, I was brought up in Johannesburg and all that. Things were going, relatively well for us. I was doing a bit of web design, had my own little thing running. But, really soon after we got married, we thought, let's have an adventure, let's head to London and just see what happens. So we didn't have any kind of vision what that would look like, how long we would be here. We just thought, hey, well, let's just go. And we did. Yeah, that's where I would say things kind of got interesting for us because we arrived in London with 2 suitcases of all our belongings. That was it. And we didn't have jobs either. So we really had to kind of figure things out from there,
Yeah. So did you just have a little safety net that you said this is how long we can sort of be here for until we find something, or how did that actually work?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, we obviously had a little bit of savings, but you convert that to pounds. You could buy like three meals or something. So it wasn't a very solid plan, I'd say. The one secure piece of kind of knowledge we had is that my wife is an occupational therapist, and at the time that was quite a sought after, in demand job in London anyway. So we had a fair level of confidence that it would be okay. Although upon arriving, there's all these kind of hoops that you have to jump through for the health profession, which makes sense, which we knew about, but that stuff took longer. So I guess it did add to kind of the stress of, oh man, okay, how long can we survive? Things just work out amazingly well, and I think we just had to push through those hard times initially. But I think my wife found work quite, relatively early on. We were then able to get a tiny little place. When I mean tiny, it's the size of my office I'm sitting in. From there, things got even more interesting.
Yeah, what I love about that is how you didn't really know how things were going to pan out. And I think oftentimes when we have this feeling that we want to do something, but then we start thinking of all the ways it could go wrong and end up not taking any action at all. So I love the fact that you kind of just dived in and had this sort of trust that it'll all work out somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, man. And, for us, the fallback was, we could head back to SA if it didn't work or whatever else, and I think you're right. It is just looking at that, what you really want to do. You know what I mean? What is that next step? For us, that was the next step and we just made it happen. We hardly even thought about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And now something that ties into that, and we mentioned via email before this interview, is you said you kind of hacked your way into contracting. I wonder if you could share some details about that and that whole story of how you found work.
Absolutely, man. So I guess this ties into a little bit of my mindset growing up because, I'm not one of those typical guys who, come from a very highly educated background. I've got no degrees or anything. which was my own decision at the time, to be honest. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school. And I think a lot of people have that same dilemma, right? It's like, what do I do? I'm just going to go and study for the sake of it. I felt that would have been me. So, just rewinding a bit, I kind of just, as I say, self-taught myself some skills and all of that. The reason why that's relevant is because, when I got to London, I knew that I had some web design background that I had done. And actually, just before I left to come to London, I did a project management course. I really started to investigate work in London, and I realized that the contracting market is quite lucrative. And I kind of decided early on when I arrived, that was what I was going to do, which is interesting because I didn't know much about it, right? You're arriving in a new country, you got to research all this stuff. So for me, it was like figuring out how this whole system works. And then I started knocking on doors. And let's be honest, it was actually a challenge because it was like, month 1, I would send stuff out, month 2, apply specifically for contracting jobs, and nothing was like ticking, right? So you start having the self-doubt, this internal dialogue, right? I mean, we've all been there, and it's like that was in itself probably one of the biggest lessons I take away from those early days. It was just that persistence of kind of just pushing through. And yeah, one thing led to the next. Someone got in touch with me, said that there's a project management position opening up at Microsoft, which was cool. So I was like, yeah, it sounds cool. And what was really cool is that they could see that my background was quite entrepreneurial in terms of like my web design background. You could see that I just done a project management thing. So I kind of went in there as quite a junior project manager. And as you do, you're hugely nervous. This happens in life. People think, oh my gosh, am I going to cope in this? Wow, Microsoft, you have this like image in your head that, this is going to be beyond me. But, you get into these places and you just realize, man, people are people. And, organizations are actually messed up the way they run. And seriously, so I jumped in there and did the best job I could. And yeah, man, things really just took off from there.
Yeah, I want to go back to something. And well, first of all, let me say, I love the fact that you just picked up these skills along the way, things that interested you, and then those actually ended up, putting you in a position to get this job. But I want to go back. So if someone's listening to this and they have skills, maybe not a degree or qualification as such, but they have the skills, what are some of your tips for sort of advertising the fact that they could fill a position based on those skills that they have, but not necessarily a degree or a qualification?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is going to sound, I think it largely depends on, firstly, demographic. I mean, I know in the UK, at the time anyway, and I don't know if this is relevant so much today, but it was more around what is your skill set? If you can prove that you've got that experience in those areas, people tend to like really enjoy that, because I think a lot of companies and people can see that actually real world experience counts a lot. You know what I mean? You can have a theory, you can study theory in your head, until you're actually doing something, you know what I mean? Those skills don't really necessarily translate into kind of proper action, if that makes sense. So if someone is sitting on that side of the fence, I would say, firstly, change your mindset. I think we all get into this thing of, well, I must get a degree. This is what people do. You get degrees and then you must find an internship and then you must grovel your way for like many years. And then maybe you start getting paid in year 5 a bit better. And then you'll climb your way up this kind of invisible corporate ladder, right? I think for me, it was like, that I knew that wasn't my path. I was confident enough in my skill set to say, actually, I know I can add value. And I think for me, it was just presenting that in the interview in a logical way. You know what I mean? It was just like, guys, look, this is who I am. This is what I've done. And playing to my strengths and just being confident in that. You know what I mean? I didn't blag my way through anything. I was just really honest about things. And so I think for people sitting on that side, it's just to, just try and change your mindset. Don't think this is how it has to happen. People are people again out there, and people connect with each other in a real way.
I couldn't agree more. So you were living in London at the time. You've both got work now.
Yeah.
But then fast forward to today, and you guys aren't in London. Where did that shift come in, and how did that come about?
Yeah, really, that's actually an interesting question. So I was contracting, let's just think, so quite a few years, probably about 4 or 5 years on and off. Most of those for Microsoft, and I was doing really well, to be honest. I mean, I was probably hitting almost £100,000 a year in income in my project management role, and which was great. So people would look at that on paper and say, obviously, geez, why change that up? I think me and my wife, I remember clearly, we actually just, I think I got home after work one day, and we were just kind of sitting down, and we were like, are we satisfied? And it was quite interesting because it was like on paper, again, everything was cool. We had the income, we had the friends, all that stuff. But there was just this like discontentment in us, and we couldn't even put our finger on it. And we kind of said, well, is this really like what we want? And I think, the grind of going to work every day got to both of us eventually. That was really quite taxing in itself, just doing the same thing. Even though the work was relatively interesting, it was just that like I'm still in a way a slave to this. I have to trade my time for hours. We started questioning that whole thing, and it was more about we're not entirely happy. So we thought, well, we had some friends who lived down here in Dorset, which is kind of countryside, in the sticks. And we used to visit them every 6 weeks or so, which was great. We would get out of London. And the more time we spent down here, we were like, this is actually quite nice. So we made like the radical decision that, yep, that's it. We're going to pack it up in London and we're just going to move down. And we ended up actually buying a house, which is great. So we bought a house down here and yeah, we are. And I guess that's where kind of the second phase of this entrepreneurship kind of journey really took off.
Yeah, and let's get into that. So you were earning the good money in London, the big money, decided to move up, go to the countryside. So where did things progress from there? Did you have work there as well, or how did you sort of handle that transition?
I actually accumulated quite a lot of extra cash through that, or extra capital through the company, which was really good. So I knew I had a safety net. Even after buying the house, I knew that my business account had some money in it, which would probably last us quite a while. So I was like totally chilled out. I was like, well, look, we'll just move and we'll figure things out, which is cool. Because we used to do that. So it was like, okay, we'll just do that. So I came down, bought the house. The house needed a lot of work. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take like 2 months, 3 months. I think it was two to 3 months, kind of just decorating the house, sorting it out, which is, I really enjoyed. And yeah, slowly the money started running out and we weren't too concerned. And also, let me just jump in that we actually had our daughter up in London, and this is, 2011. And then we came down. So our daughter was like probably just over 1 year old. So, it was fine and everything was cool. And then I started looking for contract work down here and actually realized that, wait a minute, this is not London. You know what I mean? Straight away, I was like, oh dear, jobs, contract roles down here aren't as good. So then I thought, well, let me just look permanent roles. And I realized that the salaries that they were paying down here wouldn't even keep us alive every month, with our new house and expenses. So it's at that point where I kind of thought, okay, I don't really think there's an option down here for that path. You know what I mean? I didn't want to regress in my so-called project management career by taking some full-time role and at a lower paying salary. So we had the decision, me and my wife, we said, well, look, let's start something. And before then, I obviously had a few things running on the side that, didn't take off. But I think that entrepreneurship kind of mindset was always there. So, we started researching, hey, what can we do? How can we pull our skill sets together and make something happen? So that's really what we did.
I love that. And you mentioned the entrepreneurship mindset, something that just popped into my mind. Do you think that mindset is something people are born with, or do you think it can be developed by anyone who commits to it?
Very interesting question. So I think a bit of both, to be honest. I think for me, it was ingrained very, very early on. Even when I was kind of just making my way through school and struggling, I was kind of selling popcorn outside of Spa, which is usually illegal, but you know what I mean? So I think for me, it was definitely a built-in thing. I think I just saw the world differently. But to answer your question with the real world experience is my wife. she comes from a very academic background. She always saw what I was doing, my side ventures, and I don't think she ever really got it. And the reason why I mentioned this is because, I explained, hey, like, let's look at starting a blog, which we did. And she started researching all the stuff. She started learning a lot of like online marketing and this kind of stuff. And what for me was fascinating to see how she kind of blossomed into an entrepreneur before my eyes. In a process of 2 years, I was just totally like blown away with how she has now become and thinks like an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? So for me, that was, I haven't seen that kind of transformation anywhere else, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's hope.
Yeah, totally, man. I think, everyone's got it,
So I want to dive into the online business stuff. And before I do, I just want to say, I think we touched earlier on how do you get your skills out there and market the fact that you can do a job, even if you're not formally qualified for it. And I think that online business, and I've told some people this before, I think that online business is a brilliant way to do that and to show the skills that you do have, whether that's just a blog where you write about what you're interested in, or if you've actually created something. So I wonder if you could dive in and tell everyone how you started your online business. And we spoke about entrepreneurship, but is online business for everyone, or is this also something that, it won't be a right fit for some people?
Yeah, I think that's true. It might not be a right fit for everyone, but saying that, it opens an incredible amount of doors. If you think about it, your reach becomes global, without even doing anything by default, and that was definitely true for us. So I would highly encourage, and I do often highly encourage people to explore online income as an option. And obviously you have different types of online income, but for us, there's no looking back. on that, And, in terms of how we started was the other question, was that my wife, and this is going to get a little bit personal, I'll just touch on the business that we did start, but she's got something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, which, it's quite a complicated kind of hormone disorder within women, and apparently it affects 1 in 10 women.
Wow.
There's new stats saying almost 1 in 5. So, my wife had this, and the reason why we knew is because we struggled to fall pregnant. That's one of the kind of side effects of it. But she really started researching, when we were trying to fall pregnant, how to combat this thing. So she did a ton of research, again, with a kind of medical background. She really dug deep into all that stuff. And then when we were looking together at like, hey, what can we start? I said, hey, look, PCOS sounds like a good fit, and she agreed. So we started researching that. And I did all the technical stuff on the back end, looking at, Google competition and would we be able to rank for this stuff? And it looked like, hey, at the time, really quite an open market there. So I guess I covered the technical stuff, but then she just started really blogging. I mean, I set up the blog, I set up all the technical stuff. She started just blogging about the condition, and you know what? It was amazing. Almost instantly, women were just attracted to that because they were like, wow, you're speaking about this in such a real way. You're giving good information. And that's really how it all started.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So if someone's listening to this and they do want to start a blog or some sort of online business, what would be some tips you would have for them?
The first tip is just realize that it's not easy. And the reason why I mention that is because it's taken us, it took us a good while to start really, benefiting financially from it. So I think it's to have the right mindset. Don't think you're going to jump into something tomorrow and you're going to give it 3 weeks and then you're going to earn your first, $1,000. That's very rarely happens. That's like the 2% of the times that happens. So again, understanding that it's a tool and it's a powerful tool, but then I think what you really need is that obviously that passion. You need to find that passion area that you really feel like, hey, this is your message to the world, and then you got to stick to it, man. Really, I think that's one thing is taking action and sticking to it for the longer term.
Mm. And would you say, I mean, this is a question that I speak to a lot of people about. Would you suggest starting something on the side while you still have a regular job, or just diving all in and committing to it 100%?
Wow, man. Throwing caution to the wind. I would definitely never encourage someone, unless they were like at the point of being so depressed, you know what I mean? Like nothing else is going to help. Then yeah, maybe. But honestly, I would say it is a longer journey. You know what I mean? So I would say keep doing what you're doing. In fact, there's a funny psychological thing, right? And I've seen this in my life is, if you've got a job and you're not happy in that job and you want to start something, leverage that discontentment in the job and use that as like a platform to do stuff part-time, because you'll find that you'll actually be more motivated to do stuff part-time to get out of the job. Whereas if you had, say, 40 hours a week doing nothing, you'll probably, it's interesting. There's a funny psychological thing. You got all this time. You actually don't end up taking or using that time as effectively as you could. So sometimes having that pressure, knowing why you want to get out of something, actually can push you forward.
Yeah, that's huge. All right. So you realized you needed to start something online and you did that. How has that gone now? And, share some sort of some wins with us.
Yeah. So as I say, it took a while. We started ranking in Google. Women at that stage started saying, hey, look, can you offer me anything more? And the only way to treat this condition, or one of the best ways to treat it, is through kind of proper eating regimes and lifestyle. So women were like, well, do you have any meal plans? They were saying this to my wife. We were like, yeah, sure, we can sort that out. So we responded to the audience. They were asking for stuff. So we started, I think we started out with the membership site, and it was a basic. It was like really quite cheap at that time. I think it was like $9. And my wife did a lot of research, put in a lot of effort. We got the membership site up. And yeah, we started growing from there. So that was really our first kind of taste of online income. And I mean, we were still struggling, to be honest, financially. That money had long run out that I had accumulated. And I think we started earning like about $2,000 a month, if I remember. And so there was still quite a big deficit in our kind of, pounds, everything we pay in pounds here, obviously. And our expenses in the UK are quite high. So there was this deficit each month, which was interesting because on one hand, it was a big problem. But on the other hand, it was like, well, we got to push the business forward, which we did do. And I think that was another lesson there. You just sometimes got to just keep driving. You know what I mean? Just keep pushing, even when things don't look like they're going well. Because, a lot of people would say, well, $2,000 a month. Wow, I'd love that. It'd be amazing. And yes, for us, it was true. But again, if we were living in that deficit, so the pressure was on. So we kind of, I think through that process, we just kept improving things and growing the blog, and our audience started growing, and the membership started growing. I think we were up to about $5,000 a month, which was really cool. But we were still at that place where we had accumulated a little bit of debt, which, we hugely against debt, but we had accumulated some. And then we also had to start using some of the tax money. And I'm not advising this, right? Never do that. If you start a business, don't use tax money to survive. And we had to do that. So whatever we were earning, we were drawing, and we were leaving kind of nothing left over for the tax man. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because, we had a whole year's worth of tax to pay. And we realized that we had like 2 months to pay that back to the tax man. And we obviously want to do things legally above board. So we're like, oh man, how are we going to do this? And I remember actually we were both quite down about this because we're like, oh, we worked hard in the business, kind of still just floating, keeping things alive. And we thought, well, something has to change. So we started looking into different online methods, and we came across something called, we see it often, is like a typical product launch, what a lot of internet marketers do. Yeah. So we thought, we thought, hey, let's just look at that. So we did.
Yeah, cool. So do you mind sharing some of the results from that product launch?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was really cool. So we spent about 2 weeks putting it all together. We weren't sure if it was going to even work. I think our first launch, I think we were selling, what we did is we put together quite a comprehensive course. I think we're selling for $147 per course. And yeah, we had no idea if that was going to even work, right? So I'll never forget that. We set it up. We were both working. There were some stages where I was working until 2 a.m. Taryn would go to bed, and then she would wake up at about 3 o'clock that morning and carry on. So we were almost working 24 hours to get this thing done, right? Because we knew there was pressure to pay that tax bill. And yeah, we put in all this work. We did everything what we thought was right. And our child, our kids were at the childminder at the time, and I'll never forget that it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were going to push the button to go live. That would have sent an email out to the whole list to say, hey, this course is now open. You can register for it. And again, like I had my doubts, to be honest. Sometimes you just put stuff in and you're not sure. So yeah, we pushed the button, went to pick up the kids, and within the space of, I think it was about 20 minutes from walking there and back, I think we had made something like 700 pounds. So that gave us a sense of, okay, wait, there's something in here. And I think immediately there was just the sense of relief. You know what I mean? It wasn't this arrogance, oh yeah, look at us. It was like this, oh my gosh, this is great, because we're potentially going to be out of trouble. And then just to fast forward, I mean, in that week, we only opened the course for a week, so from the Monday to the Friday. But I think we did about $35,000 in that week, which was really cool. Which definitely, I think, just about covered our tax bill. So that was an incredible experience for us. Yeah, I mean, if that happened every week, it would be a different situation. So I don't want people to think that's what you're earning. That would be great. But that's crazy. But yeah, it was really an eye opener for us, and it gave us such a confidence boost because it was one of those things. You just stick at it and you push through and you believe in it and you make it happen and you hustle. And the results were there. So for us, it was a really cool achievement. We were quite proud of ourselves in a way. And I think since then we've run 2 of those. Since then. So once every kind of 4 months we would run one of those. Yeah. So anyway, that went really well.
Oh, I love that, man. I think all of this comes back to something you touched on earlier, which I would throw in there as another tip for starting an online business. Is you created something around obviously a personal subject and also something you felt very strongly about, and then grew the audience. And then I think the most important thing is you just listened to the audience and gave them what they were asking for, rather than like build something and hope that people come. Absolutely. And I think that's a very important distinction. I want to shift now into I think your latest online business and Family Without Limits. And I wonder if you could share a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of people have kind of looked at us and looked at our lifestyle. I mean, we're starting to travel a little bit more as a family because we can with our online business. And we've actually decided to homeschool our oldest daughter, who is only 5. School in the UK starts quite young. So we just felt she was a bit young for that. So at the moment, we're teaching her from home. So, the combination of having an online business and, homeschooling our daughter, and people could see this combination, to be honest, we actually don't fit the mold. A lot of people think we're crazy down here. Like, what are you guys doing? You don't have careers ideas or anything. And that's, in a way has been something we've taken pride in. Not to say that we're different, but the fact that we can live this life, we can travel and do these things. For us, there's no turning back. You know what I mean? This is it. This is it for life. We'll go as long as we can, Hey, who knows? I might have to get a job for a while if things go south. But at this stage, it's not looking like that. It looks like this is what we want to do, So we thought, well, we really want to encourage people in our journey. We want to kind of give people hope that it is possible, you know what I mean? And yes, it's not easy, but it is possible if you just, take the steps. So our Family Without Limits is really just sharing our journey through our online adventures, sharing family life, just really being, I guess, that soundboard to people, just trying to give people a bit of hope. I think a lot of people are living in this place of discontentment and they don't know what to do. So all we want to do is just be a positive voice in that space, saying, guys, look, if you want a better life for your family and you want to spend more time as a family, which for us is worth more than money, right? This is what we're about, and this is hopefully how you can be encouraged.
I know a lot of people listening to this possibly don't have their own family yet, but regardless of that or not, the tagline for Family Without Limits is, how to live without limits regarding our time, income, and goals. I wonder if you had some tips for people listening, whether or not they had a family yet, but just how do we live without limits regarding time, income, and goals?
Yeah, I mean, that again is it's an interesting question. It's like the golden egg, right, of what we're all trying to do. I think starting out, we've touched on this already. It's really just, if you are feeling discontent or you want something more, you got to start taking action, right? You got to start. There is a way forward for you. That's the bottom line. You know what I mean? You just got to kind of have that belief and start researching. Start doing something. If you're stuck in that place, if you just sit there or thinking like you're never going to get anywhere, you know what I mean? If you're not taking action, you're not going to move forward. So, I think the first thing is just to start exploring things that you're interested in. You know what I mean? Like every single person has unique kind of abilities, unique talents, unique interests, and start researching these things, thinking, hey, is there a space in the market where I could really add my unique voice in that space? You know what I mean? Start researching the stuff, and I think that's really where it starts. It's just starting with that idea and just getting kind of hungry for what you want to do.
I love it, Tim. I do want to be mindful of the time, but for people listening to this and they want to get in touch with you, I know you've got your own personal online projects as well, and obviously Family Without Limits, and you guys have a podcast. Where can people find out more about you and engage with you guys?
Yeah, cool, man. I think, at this stage, we're podcasting quite a lot through Family Without Limits. So I think head on there. So that's familywithoutlimits.com. If you want to find out a little bit more about kind of what I'm into, you can find me at timpoulton.com. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions and, help any of your listeners out. If they need, any bit of encouragement or whatever, yeah, just seriously get in touch.
Cool. And I'll put all the links and references we mentioned in this episode in the show notes, which you guys can find at briantier.com/014. Tim, before I get to the last question, I just want to acknowledge you for coming on today and for doing what you're doing. I think it's awesome that you not only have done something about your own situation and, rather than just sit back and accept what was happening, but you actually took action to make things happen for you and now encouraging other people to do the same. And obviously, for the advice you've given me behind the scenes, if you want to call it like that. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. And the final question that I do have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start their own quarter life comeback?
Well, Brian, firstly, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. It's really a pleasure, kind of just having this conversation. And I love what you're doing, by the way. I think it's such a great message. In terms of what people could do this week, really just maybe start formalizing some kind of idea around what you could do online. Maybe start listening to some, different podcasts, business podcasts, and that kind of thing. Just start jotting down some ideas and just, see what develops from there.
I love it. Tim, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Brian, awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
So there you have it, guys. That wraps up this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback. And thanks so much for Tim again for coming on this week. I really enjoyed the interview. And, just like Tim said, if you've got a situation that you're trying to get out of, or you have an idea of some sort of online business, start brainstorming ways you can make it come alive and just start thinking of ideas which would set you apart from what's already out there. If you like this episode or someone else who's interested in starting an online business, make sure you share it out with them via the links at the show notes, where you'll also find everything we spoke about. And those are at briantier.com/014. Finally, if you guys want to get all these episodes as soon as they come out, make sure you head on over to briantier.com/subscribe, where you'll join my email list and get notifications as well as other cool stuff I only mention to my subscribers. Thanks once again for joining me. And until next week, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.